Chapter 984. Looking back. Xianxia didn't look back. The moment he heard Li Tianlan's voice, he rushed straight ahead. There was no attack behind him. The dark domain that enveloped the entire Emperor Dong's palace was churning and shrinking wildly. The starlight and the night reappeared. The huge domain shrank to 100 meters in less than a breath, and then shrank again. 50 meters, 30 meters, 15 meters. Li Tianlan inexplicably felt a trace of familiarity. Everyone who saw this scene felt that it was very familiar, but also very strange. The domain, which had shrunk to 15 meters, had become completely substantial. The darkness formed the strongest wall, and countless glimmers flickered on the dark wall. Xianxia stood in the center of the dark wall, with an indestructible momentum. This was the unique skill of the Jiang family of South America. 30-meter mortal world. Before Xianxia appeared, it was known as the strongest domain in the dark world, and its defense was the best in the world. But this was also Xianxia's unique skill. The limit of 30-meter mortal world was only 30 meters. It was known that there was nothing to fear within 30 meters, but Xianxia exceeded the limit and shrank the domain by half again. When the domain was condensed to this extent, the defense was not simply doubled. The dark wall was completely condensed. Standing in the darkness, Xianxia appeared in front of all the spectators for the first time. In countless corners of Emperor Dong's palace, the representatives of different forces were watching this scene quietly. When the domain spread to the entire Emperor Dong's palace, they could only see darkness and the occasional sword light in the darkness. At this moment, it could be said that Xianxia appeared in people's sight for the first time. It's going to end. In the office on the 5th floor of Emperor Dong's palace, Saint, Li Shi, and Situ Tsongyue, the 3 deputy palace masters, stood side by side and watched Xianxia appear from the darkness. Saint said lightly. Li Shi did not speak. Situ Tsongyue nodded and said yes. The most tricky thing about Xianxia was his domain. For the time being, no one had a deep understanding of the domain beyond the peak of the invincible realm, which was also the biggest variable. But at this time, Xianxia completely shrank the domain, which meant that he gave up his biggest advantage and became defensive. He defended in front of Li Tianlan. This was a complete joke. In the center of the dark wall, Xianxia's body had been tense to the limit. He couldn't find Li Tianlan, nor would he believe Li Tianlan's nonsense. The only thing he could do was to shrink his domain to the extreme. Within a range of 15 meters, there was no space for Li Tianlan to hide at all, and the extremely condensed domain was not something that Li Tianlan could break at will. He had tested out Li Tianlan's true state, and the purpose of the challenge had been achieved. At this point, he could already retreat to Beihai. Countless eyes were focused on Xianxia. It was quiet inside and outside the domain. In front of him was an extremely solid wall, and outside the wall was the night sky and starry sky of Emperor Dong's palace. There was no Li Tianlan. A drop of cold sweat flowed down Xianxia's forehead, and there was only astonishment left in his heart. How could there be none? What is he hiding? Where is it? Xianxia cautiously moved his body. Everything was normal inside and outside the domain. He was the only one there. But he was sure that Li Tianlan was nearby, somewhere he couldn't see. Since he couldn't see Li Tianlan, he naturally didn't dare to retreat. Xianxia took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. The tall walls surrounding him stood before him, solid, deep, and heavy. That was his ultimate defense in his current state. Li Tianlan might be able to break the domain by force, but he definitely couldn't do it in a short time. His expression calmed down little by little. He was safe in the domain. Li Tianlan couldn't break his domain, which meant that he could force his way out of Emperor Dong's palace. Just like Li Tianlan couldn't see through his domain before, so he chose not to look at it. He couldn't find Li Tianlan's position now, so he wouldn't look for it. Without any hesitation, the domain, which had shrunk to a range of 15 meters, shook violently. Xianxia's body rose into the air and was about to rush into the distance. He didn't care about the so-called face. He didn't have much expectation for this challenge. Now that he had confirmed Li Tianlan's current state, it was a worthwhile trip. Tonight, the dark world might laugh at him, but after dawn, everyone would shut up. His feet left the ground, and the domain was shaking. His speed instantly increased to the limit. Sprint! Xianxia's body had already risen into the air, but he didn't rush out. He felt a sharp pain in his scalp. The moment his feet left the ground, a hand directly reached out from behind him and grabbed his hair. Because the speed was too fast, this grab almost scratched off his scalp. Xianxia gave a muffled groan and didn't react for a while. "Why don't you look back?" In the faint voice, the attacks fell like a storm in an instant. The whole Emperor Dong's palace fell into a dead silence the moment Li Tianlan's voice sounded. The Heroes Club, the Men in Black, the Shadow Throne. All the representatives of the forces stared at the scene in front of them, as if they were completely petrified. All the high-level officials of Emperor Dong's palace looked incredulous, as if they had seen a ghost. Xianxia didn't see anything. He was only suffering attacks, continuous attacks. But his figure appeared in everyone's sight, so everyone saw Xianxia and Li Tianlan. In the luxurious bedroom, Horsewoman stood beside Qin Weibai with a puzzled look. She subconsciously glanced at Qin Weibai and asked, "How did he do it?" "I don't know," Qin Weibai said quickly. She frowned tightly and stared at Xianxia, who was being attacked crazily. There was no surprise in her eyes, only a touch of confusion and worry. She didn't know what Li Tianlan's state meant. At least in the stories she had read and heard, Dongqing Huangtu didn't seem to have this kind of martial arts. Everything seemed to have changed at this moment. Li Tianlan, Dongqing Huangtu. Different times. The parallel lines that were parallel to each other and finally intersected seemed to fly in different directions again after a short intersection. "Why is this happening?" Qin Weibai murmured to herself and shook her head hard. "Is this still martial arts?" Saint stared at the battlefield. The battlefield was getting farther and farther away. Xianxia wanted to run. The moment Li Tianlan's attack broke out, the two moved crazily. The domain within 15 meters. Li Tianlan had been in the domain all the time. Li Tianlan couldn't break this domain in a short time. And Xianxia, who was in an extreme defensive posture, couldn't cancel this domain in a short time. The area of 15 meters had become a domain where death and danger coexisted. The unique skill that once belonged to the Li family broke out without reservation. In close combat, Li Tianlan was not afraid of anyone at all. Xianxia didn't even have a chance to look back. He could only hide. Without looking back, he just ran forward crazily. He ran out of Emperor Dong's palace and rushed into the old city area of Shenyuan City, which was being renovated. The two figures gradually disappeared from sight. Saint suddenly turned back, looked at Situ Tsungyue, and said seriously, "What is this?" Li Shi was also looking at Situ Tsungyue. In their minds, in the whole dark world, apart from Li Tianlan, it seemed that only Situ Tsungyue could answer this question. "I don't know." Situ Tsungyue recalled the scenes just now. Li Tianlan was in the domain. But when Xianxia appeared, not only Xianxia, but also all of them didn't see Li Tianlan in the space of 15 meters. Situ Tsungyue smiled bitterly and whispered, "I think apart from Tianlan, only my brother can answer this question." Boom! A loud noise suddenly came from the distant night. An abandoned low-rise building waiting to be demolished completely collapsed under the huge force. Smoke and dust flew all over the sky. Xianxia's body fell from the ruins with the broken building at the same time. Puff! Blood spurted out of his mouth. He knelt on one knee on the ground and coughed violently. "Why don't you look back?" Li Tianlan asked again. The voice was right in his ear. Xianxia suddenly turned back. The domain was still there. But there was nothing behind him. Xianxia felt cold all over. There was nothing behind him. Except for his shadow. The distant starlight and light converged, outlining his shadow on the ground. The shadow was very faint. Xianxia knelt on the ground and lowered his head. His shadow was standing, maintaining a posture of waving a fist. Xianxia looked confused. He hesitated and said in a hoarse voice, "What is this? How did you do it?" Li Tianlan's voice came from his shadow. His voice was also confused. "I don't know." Chapter 985. The dilapidated building collapsed completely, and countless pieces fell to the ground. In the smoke and dust, Xianxia dodged the falling heavy objects. He stood where he was and was silent for a long time. His shadow moved with him, always maintaining an offensive posture. All kinds of emotions swirled in his mind, getting stronger and stronger. Some were absurd, some were frightened, and some were confused. All the emotions reached their limits in the shortest time. Xianxia gasped and opened his mouth. He seemed to want to laugh, but after a ha, his whole body froze there. He was omniscient and omnipotent in his domain. He shrank his domain to maintain defense, but he couldn't find Li Tianlan. The answer was simple and absurd. Li Tianlan was now in his shadow. Almost all the people watching the battle in Emperor Dong's palace saw this scene, but no one could understand what was going on. The moment Xianxia's feet left the ground, the shadow behind him moved directly to his side, reached out, and grabbed his hair. Then it was attack, 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 attack. They fought out of Emperor Dong's palace and into the old city. Smoke and dust flew, the building collapsed, and the stones flew. From beginning to end, people couldn't see Li Tianlan. Xianxia seemed to be playing boxing with his shadow, or to be beaten unilaterally by the shadow. He had no power to fight back. Li Tianlan became Xianxia's shadow. In this state, he could ignore any attack at all, because all the attacks couldn't hit him. The living person walked into the shadows of others. Did Li Tianlan become someone else's shadow? Or existed in someone else's shadow? If it was the former, how did he do it? If it was the latter, then from the perspective of physics and biology, what kind of way did he exist? At present, there seemed to be no way to explain this matter. At least for the time being, science couldn't explain it, nor could martial arts. Merging into the opponent's shadow from the domain. This time was very short, but it seemed to break some incomprehensible definitions. But for now, neither Li Tianlan nor Xianxia understood what it meant. Xianxia looked at his shadow silently. He didn't move. Li Tianlan in the shadow was also motionless. Everything seemed to have an answer. Xianxia gradually narrowed his eyes and laughed coldly. You can't attack? The shadow didn't speak. But Xianxia directly confirmed this. This kind of combat style of directly entering the opponent's shadow could no longer be described as strange. It was completely impossible to guard against. In this state, Li Tianlan was truly invincible. Invincible was not an adjective, but a real state. He could attack unscrupulously, but he was not afraid of any form of attack. At the very least, he was not afraid of any physical attack. Nobody can hurt him. Then he could kill anyone. If this was a unique skill without any restrictions, Xianxia knew very well that he would not be able to live until now. With Li Tianlan's strength, he could not even survive a minute in front of Li Tianlan in this state. Obviously, this kind of unique skill had great limitations. Xianxia calmed down completely. He recalled the scenes he had just experienced, and his eyes kept flickering. This kind of unique skill might be unlimited, but Li Tianlan obviously hadn't found the right way to use it. The level of the attack he had just endured was far lower than Li Tianlan's normal attack intensity, and the attack rhythm was very slow. It seemed that Li Tianlan needed to constantly adjust every time he made a move, but it was unknown what this adjustment would cost him. I can't attack? In the shadow, Li Tianlan's playful voice sounded. To be exact, what you need is time. Xianxia looked extremely embarrassed, but his voice became calm again. So, the last thing you should give me is time. Under the dim light, some of the dim shadows suddenly flared up. Xianxia's shadow instantly left his body. Xianxia did not move. But the shadow began to dive directly. One after another, incomparably illusory sword energy and invisible matter stabbed Xianxia silently. Compared with just now, Li Tianlan's attack seemed to be a little stronger, but the frequency was a little slower. Boom! The ruins on the ground were completely lifted up by the surging sword energy. Countless steel bars and stones were swept into the sky and turned into pieces. Xianxia's figure retreated quickly, and the domain around him was dissipating quickly. The completely illusory shadow seemed to have substance at this moment. After a short pause, the shadow directly punched. Li Tianlan's current state was extremely strange. He himself couldn't tell what was going on, but he could roughly understand his situation at this time. He appeared in Xianxia's shadow, and his every move consumed many times more physical strength than under normal circumstances. In this case, his body was completely illusory, which was equivalent to a real invincible realm state. But the power and frequency of his attacks were greatly limited to the combat capability of the invincible realm. If he wanted to break through this level of power, he didn't need to pay a heavy price. But once the power and frequency of his attacks exceeded this limit, he would directly come out of the shadow. Just as he told Lin Fengting in the desert, his path was unorthodox. He could use his existing system, martial arts, and the Li family's invincible manual to make his body reach the most balanced state, so that he could speed up his attack frequency countless times with the power of the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, and thus exert the strength beyond the peak of the invincible realm. But his realm had been stuck here, and he had not really broken through and entered the invincible realm. The combat capability of the invincible realm was his current upper limit, and also the limit of the power he could exert after merging into someone else's shadow. He couldn't achieve balance in the shadow at all, at least not now. If he was now at the peak of the invincible realm, or even really beyond the peak of the invincible realm, then even in Jiang Shangyu's shadow, his strength was still a super expert beyond the peak of the invincible realm. Jiang Shangyu couldn't hold on for a few seconds in his hands. But now the upper limit of his combat capability of the invincible realm, if he wanted to keep up with Jiang Shangyu's speed, he could only let Jiang Shangyu's shadow move by itself. This also consumed Li Tianlan's physical strength, and the power he could exert was further reduced. The most realistic situation was that all his attacks could not really break the defense of Jiang Shangyu, who was focused on defense. What he needed was a chance. A chance to completely master the rhythm and turn the illusion into reality, so as to hit Jiang Shangyu hard. Jiang Shangyu kept retreating, and his eyes were fixed on the shadow that followed him like a shadow. The countless illusory dragon shadows brought by the dragon fist rushed in front of him, and then slowly dissipated in the darkness. Wisps of obscure darkness kept penetrating his shadow. Even in this state, Jiang Shangyu still did not forget to fight back. Li Tianlan was indeed invincible now. But Jiang Shangyu didn't believe that there was really an invincible realm immune to all attacks. He was still trying to find a way to deal with Li Tianlan's wonderful state. The shadow followed him like a shadow. The two sides attacked and defended, and the rhythm was getting faster and faster. Jiang Shangyu kept trying. In different ways. All his counterattacks were in vain, but he never gave up, and the rhythm was the same. However, in the old city area that had been out of the sight of all the spectators, no one noticed that although Jiang Shangyu's counterattack rhythm remained the same, his body, which was constantly retreating, was getting tighter and tighter. Li Tianlan was waiting for an opportunity. Coincidentally, Jiang Shangyu was also waiting for an opportunity. Chapter 986. It was like the top psychological game. Whether it was Li Tianlan or Jiang Shangyu, both of them were silently waiting for an opportunity. It was difficult for Li Tianlan in the shadow state to break Jiang Shangyu's defense. Jiang Shangyu, who had calmed down, was now clear about this. Both sides needed an opportunity. Li Tianlan needed to find a perfect opportunity to break out of the shadow and kill Jiang Shangyu with one blow. At the same time, the moment of breaking out of the shadow was also an opportunity for Jiang Shangyu to hurt Li Tianlan. Crack! In the clear cracking sound, Jiang Shangyu finally released the small-scale domain that he had condensed to the limit. The thick and obscure darkness spread wildly. Half of the old district of Shenyuan City became dark in an instant. After getting out of the small-scale domain, Jiang Shangyu's dodging speed instantly accelerated. After all, the domain was his home field. In the dark, his every move could be said to be like a fish in water. Retreat. Dodge. At this moment, Jiang Shangyu seemed to be integrated with the darkness. In the darkness, his figure was like a black flowing light, appearing 100 meters away in the blink of an eye. Like a shadow. In the loud bang, an excavator parked on the construction site flew up the moment Jiang Shangyu's feet landed on the ground. The extremely fierce fist wind brushed past Jiang Shangyu's ear and hit the excavator. The huge force exploded in all directions. The engine, the oil pump, and even the tracks flew out at the same time and disintegrated in the air. The crane arm flew in the air, and the excavator was completely deformed. In the loud roar, the oil tank exploded in the violent collision. The fire rose into the sky. Jiang Shangyu rushed into a nearby construction site with his shadow in the shining fire. It was like a hurricane passing through. The whole construction site became fragmented in an instant. Steel bars, supports, wood, oil drums, components, everything in the construction site was completely blown up and deformed in an instant, as if two monsters were chasing and rushing through the construction site. The shadow was still moving. The power and pure sword light completely broke out in each style of dragon fist, and it seemed to attack Jiang Shangyu's vital parts tirelessly. The explosion sounded nearby, and the fire spread to the construction site. It went all the way along the overturned oil drums, and the fire rose into the sky. The sound of fire trucks had been heard in the distance, and the battle was still spreading in the direction of the old district. Resolute, decisive, fierce, and crazy. The moment the fire spread, the mixing station near the construction site collapsed with a roar, and countless pieces of cement and concrete poured down wildly. Jianghu rushed through the messy construction site and rushed into the nearby abandoned building. The shadow of the blue dragon flashed in the whole building in the next second, and the dragon's roar was earth-shattering. Countless blue electric arcs raged in the empty building. The whole building seemed to be buried with a bomb inside. The electric arcs burst, and smoke and dust flew. The 7-story building seemed to have experienced countless explosions inside, and the whole staircase suddenly became ruins. The shadow and Jianghu were entangled in a frenzy. Attack, 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 attack. Li Tianlan was nowhere to be seen. Only shadows could be seen. The dark shadow seemed to have gone completely mad. The sudden burst of attacks turned the shadow into a mirage. Every part of the shadow was attacking. Its limbs were maintaining a high frequency of crazy attacks. It was an indescribable madness, silent and determined. Every movement of the shadow was clearly conveying a bloody and cruel concept. Kill, kill, kill. Countless punches and kicks fell in front of Jianghu almost at the same time. A dark shadow surrounded Jianghu. It seemed illusory, but when the punches and kicks hit it, there were countless dull roars. No stop. Without any pause, Li Tianlan in the shadow clung to Jianghu. There was a violent wind, heavy rain, and thunder. The shadow of the dragon surrounded by the blue electric light crazily moved and rose. Every joint of the body was shaking, and the dragon's roar was extremely loud. The dragon's fist, which kept changing, hit the dark shadow in front of Jianghu without any hesitation. Retreat, rush forward, attack, and punch. The shadow that protected Jianghu became thinner and thinner at a speed visible to the naked eye. Li Tianlan, who was releasing his physical strength to his heart's content, moved faster and faster. He and Jianghu kept a close distance of less than 1 meter. In addition to the shadow, there were only endless flashing electric arcs between them. The shadow dimmed and then condensed again. The coverage of the dark realm was obviously less. Boom, boom, boom. Countless punches and kicks hit it hard. The darkness in the realm surged faster and faster. The shadow, which had dimmed to the lowest point, became clearer and clearer. It became solid again and completely wrapped Jianghu in it. The coverage of the realm was still shrinking. Attack, destroy, repair. The corners of Jianghu's mouth rose slightly, with some mockery. In this state, Li Tianlan might be very terrible in the future. But now his new discovery or new breakthrough was not perfect, so there was nothing to be afraid of at all. The point was, after tonight, would Li Tianlan still have a future? The realm stopped shrinking. The shadow around Jianghu instantly condensed again and was unbreakable. At that moment, all the dragon's roar disappeared completely. Without any warning, the moment the shadow stopped, Li Tianlan's aura plummeted. A faint blue electric arc that was extremely weak but wildly twisted was directly pressed by Li Tianlan on the shadow in front of Jianghu. His figure suddenly rushed out of the shadow and stood in front of Jianghu. Fuck! Humph! Jianghu, whose face changed dramatically, cursed. Li Tianlan also snorted with an ugly face. At the closest distance, the faint blue electric arc in Li Tianlan's hand was pressed directly on Jianghu's face, almost against the shadow. The electric arc, which looked extremely weak and small, flickered gently, dreamy and beautiful. It gently deformed and seemed to be extremely slow, but in fact, because of the high degree of distortion, it had exceeded the speed visible to the naked eye. A fatal danger suddenly broke out. It was as if countless experts at the peak of the thunder-shocking realm were standing on his face and attacking without reservation. The electric arc, which twisted thousands of times in a second, burst out in an extremely violent way. There was only thunder in the darkness. The boundless, ocean-like lightning covered every corner of the place. The roar was earth-shattering. The dark shadow in front of Jianghu, which had recovered to its solid state, was completely torn into nothingness in the blink of an eye. The majestic and unimaginable power and sword energy completely surrounded Jianghu at the closest distance. A rain of blood flew. Xianxia roared and retreated crazily, but the endless thunderbolts had already covered every area nearby. Wherever he went, he was being attacked by endless experts of the thunder-shocking realm. Blood stained his body as he roared. It was completely out of instinct. He kept retreating, just wanting to stay away from Li Tianlan. Almost at the same time as the thunder broke out, Li Tianlan also noticed the difference in the surrounding domain. In the domain filled with darkness, black silk threads appeared one after another. Strands of black silk formed an impenetrable net. The black silk was extremely soft, but also extremely sharp. All the lines crisscrossed, completely sealing off the surroundings. The thunder spread and spread in the domain. The black silk threads were also madly intertwining and increasing. The moment the thunder broke Xianxia's defense, the dense black silk thread suddenly tightened and shrouded Li Tianlan. It was endless. Densely packed. Faint blue electric arc dark silk threads. Both sides broke out at the same time. The whole domain was completely boiling. Li Tianlan's body was tense, and the dazzling sword light was emitted from almost every pore on his body. The sword intent was mighty, and the sword energy rose to the sky. Layer after layer of black threads came down without any hesitation. The sword energy and the black silk threads collided wildly. It was the entanglement of light and darkness, but Li Tianlan heard countless sounds of metal colliding. Saber light and sword shadow. The sound of countless weapons colliding filled the whole world in an instant. Li Tianlan's breath stagnated. In an instant, blood came out of his eyes, ears, nostrils, and mouth. His 7 orifices were bleeding. The black silk thread suppressed the sword light in an instant, and countless lines fell on Li Tianlan's body. At this moment, Xianxia was surrounded by endless thunder, and Li Tianlan was wrapped by countless black lines. The sword light, the black silk, and the same blood kept splashing on the two of them. It was hard to say whether it was because of their tacit understanding or because their fighting consciousness was at the same level. At the most unlikely point of time, the two of them made almost the same choice. When the crazy explosion in the shadow was about to shatter the barrier around Jianghu shrank the domain and began to repair the barrier in front of him. Li Tianlan always maintained his own attacking rhythm. That was destined to be the most uneasy moment for Jianghu. He shrank the domain in order to fight back with all his strength. But during the whole process, Li Tianlan never made a move. He let Jianghu repair the barrier in front of him. The moment the repair was completed, it was also the moment when Jianghu subconsciously relaxed. Li Tianlan directly rushed out of the shadow. The opportunity flashed away. Perhaps in less than half a second, Li Tianlan attacked with all his strength, regardless of everything. Jianghu might have expected this, but the time was too short. He was a little slower, and he also fought back with all his strength the moment Li Tianlan revealed his real body. So the black silk threads and thunder all over the sky burst out at the same time. Jianghu was seriously injured, and Li Tianlan was also seriously injured. The harsh sound of weapons rubbing against each other echoed wildly in his ears. Blood flowed down from his body, and Li Tianlan's will was completely hit. In the dark domain, he seemed to be the only light source. Endless sword light spread out around him, getting brighter and brighter. The two sides had been far away from Emperor Dong's palace, and no one in Emperor Dong's palace could see the scene here. But even from a long distance, the experts in Emperor Dong's palace could still feel the power that was constantly spreading in the distance. The thick white mist completely wrapped Li Tianlan's body. Light. There was only the purest light left around him. Hot, pure, and surging like a raging fire. In the sky above the old city of Shenyuan City, with Li Tianlan as the center, waves of visible shockwaves were constantly spreading. The light around Li Tianlan had been extremely bright, dispelling the darkness. He seemed to have become a sun. The thunder all over the domain merged with every ray of light, and the powerful destructive power impacted every corner of the domain. Li Tianlan took a step forward. His bare feet stepped on the ground, a little cold, but extremely stable. Boom! The light was monstrous, and the endless surging sword light burst out like countless torrents. The thick darkness was squeezed together, twisted, deformed, and shattered. In the deafening sound, Jianghu's domain, which surpassed the peak of the invincible realm, was completely torn apart by the endless sword light, leaving nothing. The light disappeared. But there was a thick fog in the old city late at night. The vast white fog completely enveloped Li Tianlan, and also blocked the sight of others. A large amount of vitality in the white fog poured into Li Tianlan's body. The wounds in his body began to heal quickly, and the bleeding stopped quickly. Cough! In the heart-wrenching cough, Xianxia coughed up blood and struggled to stand up. The white fog kept repairing Li Tianlan's body. Li Tianlan squinted at Xianxia. The vast white fog merged with him as the center, and his aura kept rising at a speed visible to the naked eye. To Li Tianlan's surprise, Xianxia's aura also began to rise from the bottom. It seemed that a considerable part of the terrifying attack just now did not hit him. Li Tianlan frowned. To be exact, when all the attacks hit Xianxia, some of them were diverted. Diverted? You're pretty good, but your strength is just oh. Li Tianlan's voice was cold. Xianxia was not the strongest of all the experts he had ever met. But he could definitely be said to be one of the strongest opponents he had ever met. The key was that this kind of opponent with all kinds of tricks was hard to fathom. Even now, Li Tianlan did not see through all his trump cards. Just oh? Xianxia chuckled. Their auras rose at the same time. Li Tianlan's recovery speed was countless times faster than Xianxia's. But Xianxia seemed to have diverted part of the damage, and his overall recovery speed was not much slower than Li Tianlan's. Can you still enter my shadow? Xianxia twisted his neck and said lightly. Want to try? Li Tianlan's tone was cold. Yes. Xianxia looked at Li Tianlan and said seriously, how about letting me try again if you can? Li Tianlan fell silent. Enter Xianxia's shadow again? He didn't know how he did it just now. Now he got out of the shadow and wanted to merge with the other party's shadow. Li Tianlan couldn't do it at all. Even Li Tianlan couldn't replicate the fusion just now. He needed to think and meditate. A road had appeared vaguely in front of him again. After the end of martial arts, the road was vague and extremely vague. Li Tianlan still needed a long time to explore before he could continue to try. He could clearly feel the feeling at that moment. From the moment he entered Xianxia's shadow, his originally perfect martial arts had become imperfect. This was not a bad thing, because this imperfection was not a defect in his current martial arts, but a new road seemed to appear after the perfect martial arts and the end of martial arts that he once saw. Li Tianlan didn't know how long the road was. Maybe it was just a step and a half, but no matter how long it was, the road always existed. His whole world seemed to have changed a little because of the moment of shuttling just now. I should try something else. Li Tianlan's fingers moved slightly. Is there anything else you can let me try? Xianxia sneered. Li Tianlan also laughed. His smile wasn't arrogant or haughty, but there was a hint of pity in it. Did you misunderstand something? Li Tianlan said softly, I haven't seen a domain-type figure who has broken through the peak of the invincible realm, so I'm just playing with you. Don't take it seriously. After all. Whoosh! A gust of wind suddenly blew through Shenyuan City under the night sky. The wind whistled, and it was as sharp as a sword. Emperor Dong's palace was the starting point of the wind. The moment the wind sounded, the fierce wind had swept through the entire Shenyuan City. Li Tianlan's subsequent voice was extremely clear in the wind. I haven't used a sword yet. Above the night sky, the whole sky was shimmering. Colorful rays of light gradually converged from afar, creating a colorful scene. Xianxia seemed to think of something bad. His face became extremely ugly, and his facial features even became distorted in an instant. This sword again, he murmured to himself, and then without hesitation, he turned around and left. The memories in his mind became clearer and clearer like nightmares. Xianxia's heart was cold. His speed was getting faster and faster. In fact, he had already been psychologically prepared for Li Tianlan to go to this step, so he took Li Guangtu with him. But in this situation, in the state of ruthless, even if Li Guangtu came, it would be useless. Li Tianlan now had the destructive power beyond the peak of the invincible realm with his bare hands. That weak electric arc directly blew up his domain. If ruthless was added, Xianxia wouldn't even have the slightest idea. His figure quickly rose into the air, crossed the construction site in an instant, and rushed to the courtyard. Li Tianlan stood where he was, looking at his back, motionless and expressionless. The shimmer in the air had completely enveloped Shenyuan City, and the colorful light wandered in the air bit by bit. Wisps of sword intent surged out of Li Tianlan's body and merged with every colorful light in the air. Xianxia flew farther and farther. Li Tianlan stretched out his palm. A sword sound suddenly rang out in Emperor Dong's palace. Before the sword sound came out of Emperor Dong's palace, Ruthless, burning with colorful sword energy, had already appeared in Li Tianlan's hand. The horrible sword energy and energy perfectly merged and swept the city in an instant. The night sky in the sky surged and trembled violently. Li Tianlan stood where he was. At this moment, he seemed to be completely integrated with Ruthless. The energy of Ruthless was sword energy. And his sword energy became energy. An indescribable power spread out wildly with Li Tianlan as the center. The air in front of him, the sky above, and everything in sight seemed to be constantly twisting and deforming. Li Tianlan raised Ruthless in his hand. His voice rang through the world in an instant. As far as my eyes can see, Jiang Shangyu's body suddenly paused in the air. Bang! It seemed that endless darkness suddenly surged out from Jiang Shangyu's side. A wall that was completely condensed from darkness appeared beside Jiang Shangyu. Forcibly condensing the ultimate domain consumed a lot of physical strength and willpower. Jiang Shangyu's body was bleeding wildly. Li Tianlan's voice came from a distance and shook the night sky. It was simply deafening and extremely majestic. Forbid! The spreading energy rushed to the domain with Li Tianlan's voice. The colorful light rushed to the front of the domain. The strongest defense condensed to the limit, the small-scale domain that even Jiang Shangyu himself could not eliminate in a short time, disappeared directly the moment it touched the light. It did not collapse, nor did it dissipate. The thick and hard domain seemed to disappear completely without any sign or even a chance to react. Perhaps most people could not understand this scene. But Jiang Shangyu was obviously prepared for this, or he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. The moment the domain disappeared, his figure suddenly flickered and appeared directly 100 meters away. Jiang Shangyu's figure kept flashing. Before the colorful light wrapped around him, he directly rushed out of Shenyuan City. Li Tianlan held Ruthless in his hand and narrowed his eyes in silence for a moment. Everyone in Shenyuan City could feel the great power roaring in the air. All the experts above the thunder-shocking realm could feel the incredible burning and consumption of Ruthless energy. The hesitation did not last for a second. The colorful lines in the air suddenly disappeared. Li Tianlan did not finish this sentence. The moment Jiang Shangyu escaped from Shenyuan City, he put away the Ruthless in his hand. The body of the Ruthless sword became much dimmer in a short moment. The sword body quickly disintegrated and became the sword formation of the 13-story building again. Countless famous swords slowly rotated around Li Tianlan and finally disappeared. The night sky was restored to peace. The darkness outside Shenyuan City surged. Jiang Shangyu's figure jumped from the darkness to a barren mountain area outside the city. As soon as his body landed, he staggered and suddenly spat out a large mouthful of blood. Beads of blood rolled down from all over his body, and countless wounds healed quickly. Jiang Shangyu's body trembled and his expression was distorted. But the moment he landed on the ground, he suddenly laughed. He took out his cell phone with trembling hands and dialed a number. The phone was quickly answered. Li Guangtu's somewhat cold voice came over. "How is it? I lost and ran away. Ha 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 ha. Are you happy?" Li Guangtu remained calm. "Happy, of course I'm happy." Jiang Shangyu's laughter was a little crazy. "I've confirmed Li Tianlan's state and Ruthless state. The extreme state of the chosen one we discussed does exist. Although Li Tianlan has not reached the real limit, it has already taken shape. But it's a pity. Ruthless energy is running out. I let Li Tianlan use that sword move. In Ruthless' current state, Li Tianlan has at most one more sword move. Against him or against me. He's dead. Ha ha ha. He crushed a button on his shirt and poured the powder from the button into his mouth. His body swayed as he walked forward. In the distance he stopped. In the distance, there was an armed helicopter of the Freedom Corps. "You can come to Beihai." Li Guangtu's voice was calm and indifferent. "How's the situation?" Jiang Shangyu gasped a few times and asked directly. "It's going well so far. Our time is limited, so we have to speed up." "Okay." Jiang Shangyu nodded. "See you in Beihai." "See you in Beihai." The phone was hung up. Xianxia took a deep breath and strode to the helicopter. The moment the night quieted down, even Li Tianlan felt a little tired and weak. The vast white mist continuously drilled into his body. The wounds on his body healed quickly, and his aura became stable again in a very short time. Even though he was now confident that he was invincible, he had to admit that Xianxia was a very difficult opponent, especially when he didn't know the other party's martial arts. It was the first time he fought with Xianxia with his bare hands. It was not easy to defeat the other party without paying any price. If it hadn't been for the inspiration at that subtle moment, today's battle was doomed to not end so easily. Xianxia fled in a panic. Li Tianlan still stood where he was, recalling the scenes of the battle. He had successfully entered Xianxia's shadow. But even now, he didn't know how he had done all of this. At that moment, he suppressed his strength to the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, concentrated all his strength in one point, and concentrated his willpower like never before. At that moment, he locked on to Xianxia's position in the Rain of Swords. Out of his almost instinctive fighting consciousness, he wanted to quickly get close to Xianxia. Under the circumstances at that time, there was only one unique skill that could be the most convenient to do this. That was the shadow formula that Tribulation had given him. But he didn't know why he failed to place his shadow in front of Xianxia because of the interference of the domain, but he succeeded in changing his position with the shadow that he failed to place. At that time, the sky full of thunder and the dark domain completely distorted the space. When Li Tianlan appeared beside Xianxia, he was already in his shadow. Li Tianlan's brows furrowed tightly. There seemed to be no clue in his mind, but the more he thought about some of the details, the more confused he became. The road to the end of martial arts had appeared in front of him, but there seemed to be a heavy barrier between him and it. Li Tianlan couldn't see the way to go on that road for the time being. Thunder, darkness, shadow, space. All the scenes were replayed in his mind, bit by bit, again and again. He simply sat down on the ground, holding Wuxia, frowning, and his whole person was as quiet as a statue. The sound of hurried footsteps could be heard nearby. Li Tianlan raised his head and glanced. Saint and military counselor rushed over first. Then came Situ Tsungyue with Qin Weibai. Tianlan. Seeing Li Tianlan sitting on the ground, Qin Weibai's face suddenly changed. I'm fine. Li Tianlan shook his head and stood up. I'm just thinking about something. The white mist became thin and transparent little by little. Qin Weibai came to Li Tianlan and touched the wounds on his body. All the wounds had begun to heal, but Li Tianlan, who was covered in blood, still looked a little shocking. It's good that you're fine. She raised her palm and touched Li Tianlan's face. Li Tianlan smiled and pinched her nose. Your Majesty, something happened in Beihai. Military counselor's voice sounded. It was a little inappropriate, but it was extremely necessary. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly. Why didn't Wang Xiangxiao contact me? Half an hour ago, all the communication signals in Beihai were cut off. Our intelligence personnel hiding in Beihai have lost contact with us. Beihai is very skilled in this aspect, but with Chen Fengqing's approval, they are fully prepared. It will take at least half an hour to restore the communication. At present, no one knows the specific situation in Beihai. But combined with all the signs, we can almost be sure that the final battle in Beihai has begun. Half an hour ago. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes and sneered. They are really good at finding time. Half an hour ago, Xianxia appeared in Emperor Dong's palace. Obviously, all this was planned. He glanced at Saint and Situ Tsungyue. They should have set off for East Island yesterday, but due to all kinds of considerations, Li Tianlan asked them to stay and watch the final battle. A domain-type superior who surpassed the peak of the invincible realm was also the enemy of Emperor Dong's palace. As deputy palace masters, it was necessary for them to have a certain understanding of the opponent. But in this battle, they could not see much. Li Tianlan shook his head subconsciously. Your Majesty, let's set off for East Island right away. Saint's tone was calm. Although he and Situ Tsungyue were not in East Island, the power of Emperor Dong's palace in East Island was already extremely strong. The new nightmare troop had set off under the leadership of Lin Yuxian and Li Beitian. Su Chu and Du Hanin had taken the first batch of elites to East Island a few days earlier. Now, East Island only lacked 2 superiors of the invincible realm. Okay. Li Tianlan nodded and said after a moment of silence, "Be careful." Saint and Situ Tsongyue looked at each other, turned around, and left in a hurry. Li Tianlan looked at their backs and thought of his martial arts and the final battle in Beihai. He felt a little regretful. It seemed that the path after the end of martial arts could only be studied after tonight. "Let's go back. I'll go to Beihai," Li Tianlan said slowly. Qin Weibai slightly tightened her grip. Qin Weibai held Li Tianlan's hand and whispered, "That's what we should be most careful about. Xianxia may not have lost his fighting ability. And Li Kuang too, don't underestimate them." "Don't worry." Li Tianlan patted her hand and said faintly, "Wuqing will go with me." On this trip to Beihai, he wanted to meet not only Jiang Shangyu and Li Kuang too, but also Wu You, whom Lin Fengting mentioned, and even Wang Tianzong. Li Tianlan took a deep breath and was about to say something. Wuqing, who was in his arms, suddenly shook. Almost at the same time, Li Tianlan and Qin Weibai turned their heads and looked to the north. At the end of their sight was a white mist that was gradually dispersing. Apart from that there was nothing. Li Tianlan gave Qin Weibai a strange look. Qin Weibai was also looking in that direction. Her eyes were a little confused. "What did you see?" Li Tianlan asked. "I don't know." Qin Weibai shook her head blankly. "It's an instinctive reaction. I just wanted to take a look." Li Tianlan looked at Wuqing in his arms. Wuqing was quiet and did not respond at all. Li Tianlan looked in that direction again, and his fingers moved slightly. A colorful light floated out of Wuqing's sword, which merged with the sword energy in Li Tianlan's hand and quickly swept through that area. There was nothing. Li Tianlan shook his head and didn't think too much. "Let's go." The white mist surged slightly. Li Tianlan took a step forward with Qin Weibai in his arms. The figures of two people and one sword quickly disappeared. The mist drifted in the darkness and gradually became thin. In the direction where Li Tianlan and Qin Weibai's eyes met, in the thin white mist that was almost disappearing, a sound of retching suddenly sounded. In the messy ruins, a young man, who looked less than 30 years old and was dressed very neatly, struggled to stand up in the mess. As soon as he stood up, he bent down again and retched, but nothing came out. F***CK. The young man adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses with a painful look on his face. "I told you that you should take medicine for seasickness. This is too exciting." EW. An extremely broad hand fell on the young man's back and patted him gently. The young man reached out his hand. A large bottle of pure water fell into his hand. He managed to stand up straight, unscrewed the water bottle and washed his face. The water dripped on the ground. The white mist around him seemed to be slowly surging toward him. The young man touched the cool water in his hand and washed his face hard. He seemed to be a little sober. He put the water to his mouth and gulped down more than half of the bottle. Then he took a long breath and narrowed his eyes with some enjoyment. The young man was not tall, just over 1.7 meters. He was a little fat, with a round face and a pair of glasses. He looked extremely simple and gentle. His appearance could not be regarded as handsome, but it was extremely clean. He belonged to the type that made people feel more comfortable the more they looked at him. Holding the water bottle in his hand, the young fat man looked at everything around him comfortably. After a long time, he sighed softly and said, "The place of my dream is finally here." "Your Highness, this is..." Beside the young man stood a sturdy figure at least more than 2 meters tall. Compared with the fat man, he was like a giant. "That's right. My father passed through here." The young fat man's eyes had some very simple and beautiful emotions. "This time he can let me come back. I'm afraid my brothers will envy me to death." He seemed to think of something and reached out with his tiptoes. The giant bent down sensibly and let the fat man pat his shoulder. The fat man laughed and said, "When you go out, boys should learn to protect themselves. You should call me young master in the future." "Yes, Your Highness, young master." The giant nodded with a serious face. The fat man drank water again and took a few steps forward. "It smells good." Muttering to himself, he whispered a sentence. The giant sniffed and said in a muffled voice, "Young master, what's the smell?" His voice was low, like muffled thunder. The young fat man laughed and said, "The smell of fate." He moved forward slowly and stopped in a certain place for a moment. He didn't know if it was a coincidence, But the place where he stopped was the place where Li Tianlan rushed out of Jiang Shangyu's shadow. The fat man stood in place and was silent for a while. Then he shook his head and sighed. What a terrible madman. 9,000-word chapter. Chapter 987. He took a shower and changed his clothes as soon as possible. When he walked out of the bedroom, Li Tianlan looked no different from before the battle. More and more news came from all sides. Outside the castle, the roar of the helicopter was endless, bringing a gust of wind. The representatives of the superpowers in the dark world who came to watch the battle symbolically cared about Li Tianlan's state, and then left in a hurry. The battle was over, so Li Tianlan didn't have the nature to keep them for dinner. Everyone was sensible and left immediately. There was no formal airport in Tiannan. With Li Tianlan's return to Tiannan, the military airport, which had been built more than a year ago but had been blocked by all sides, could not be put into use until at least next winter. Therefore, all the representatives came by helicopter. After leaving Shenyuan City, some of them would go to Annan City, some would go to Nanyun to take a plane or a fighter jet back to the headquarters, or go directly to Beihai. Li Tianlan put on a gorgeous black windbreaker that was completely unfolded. When Li Tianlan straightened his collar and walked out with Qin Weibai, military counselor just hung up the phone outside the door. Did Saint Anant Situ leave? Li Tianlan asked casually. The helicopter just took off 3 minutes ago. Military counselor nodded. Tiannan was very far from East Island, and the final battle in Beihai broke out suddenly. The helicopter the two invincible realm experts took would fly to Ningzhou at full speed. From Ningzhou Air Force Base, they would take a fighter jet to Dongshan Guqin Island, and then take off to East Island. If everything went well, it would take about 3 hours. The situation in Dongshan was complicated. Although the Prince Group had a traditional advantage in Dongshan, the Southeast Group was not weak. As for Guqin Island, it was the place whereby Qingqian was in power many years ago. Zhou Yuanshan also served as the mayor of Guqin Island a few years ago, so his influence was deep-rooted. With the face of the Dongqing clan, it would not be a problem to arrange a private plane. Li Tianlan nodded and walked down the stairs. The military counselor's voice sounded unhurriedly, clear and steady. I just received a call from Freedom Corps Commander Ning. An armed helicopter of the Freedom Corps left the designated area of the Corps without permission during training. The pilot turned off the positioning system. The Freedom Corps forcibly restored the positioning 15 minutes ago. The position shown by the helicopter has already bypassed Ningbian from the direction of Shenyuan City and entered Nanyun Province. Li Tianlan stopped and said, Is it to pick up Jiang Shangyu? Very likely. Military counselor nodded. Jiang Shangyu's plan is very clear. He doesn't expect to win this battle at all. In the bet with him, a lot of money comes from the Jiang family of South America, Jifeng Sword Training School, and even Knights Templars. However, he is very confident in self-protection. He has arranged for a helicopter in advance. After the battle, he will take the helicopter to escape. At this time, it is estimated that the other party will soon arrive at the Nanyun base. His next step will definitely be to Beihai. Military counselor paused and continued. Based on our current analysis and speculation, Jiang Shangyu has many purposes for challenging your majesty. First of all, he wants to attract the attention of the dark world to Tiannan, so as to complete the final arrangement in Beihai. Second, he wants to test his majesty's state and confirm his real combat capability, so as to carry out effective targeted actions. Finally, Jiang Shangyu may want to consume Shen Yuan Feng's energy. From the looks of it, his plan has been executed very successfully. Your Majesty, you must be more careful during this trip to the North Sea. With Jiang Shangyu's domain, Li Guangtu's sword, and the cooperation of several invincible realm experts, the situation is very complicated. He quickly glanced at Qin Weibai beside Li Tianlan. Seeing that she didn't say anything, he continued, The only good news is that we have successfully made contact with Flaming Fire. Flaming Fire set off a few hours ago through the passage of Wulan State. He will arrive at Beihai a little later than your Majesty. Under the soft light, Qin Weibai's expression did not change at all. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. Flaming Fire? Queen of Darkness, Full Moon Song. Military Counselor said softly. I haven't seen her for a long time. Li Tianlan didn't know what to think. He shook his head slightly and pressed the button for the elevator. The helicopter has been arranged. Your Majesty can take off at any time. Military counselor followed Li Tianlan meticulously. The three of them walked out of the elevator. Li Tianlan shook his head slightly. No, I'll go directly to Ningzhou. It's faster. Go directly? Without the helicopter? Military counselor was stunned and hesitated. Shen Yuan Feng's energy? It's okay. Li Tianlan smiled, looked at Qin Weibai beside him, and said softly, Wait for me to come back. Be careful. Qin Weibai tidied Li Tianlan's collar and said softly. Li Tianlan said yes. A sword light lit up in front of the castle of Shenyuan City. The sword light went straight into the sky and appeared in the distance in the blink of an eye. The dazzling beam of light shrank toward the sky. The sword light flashed again and disappeared completely in the night sky. Qin Weibai raised her head and looked at the night sky silently, without saying a word. Military counselor's voice was interrupted by another voice as soon as it rang out. Hey. What the hell, he left? Why did he leave just like that? It's so fast. Too fast, too fast. Military counselor turned his head with a stunned look. In his sight, two different figures walked over from the night sky. An honest-looking young fat man who looked a little happy trotted to military counselor. He seemed to be afraid that military counselor would misunderstand, so he stood at a safe distance. Beside him, a burly giant at least 2 meters tall followed him. The two stopped less than 5 meters away from military counselor. They raised their heads at the same time and silently looked in the direction where Li Tianlan left. Tut! The fat man sighed. It's not a good start. Really? The military counselor looked a little confused, but his body tensed up secretly, and he was a little vigilant. He didn't know the fat man in front of him, but he was sure that he was not from Emperor Dong's palace, because the giant beside him was not from Emperor Dong's palace. With an exaggerated height of nearly 3 meters, such a person could bring a great sense of oppression to people even if he didn't know martial arts. If there was such a person in Emperor Dong's palace, military counselor would have an impression. Similarly, he would not be the representative of the superpowers who came to watch the battle. He was not from Emperor Dong's palace, nor was he the representative of the superpowers. Such a person appeared in the core area of Emperor Dong's palace under the sight of countless guards. Military counselor raised his vigilance in his heart, but he didn't take the initiative to attack. From him, he only felt curiosity and no malice. Who are they? Perhaps because the fat man's appearance was easy to make people feel good, military counselor's voice was extremely calm. The fat man was stunned. He seemed to be focused on chasing Li Tianlan, so he didn't notice military counselor and heard his question. Who were they? The fat man glanced awkwardly at the giant beside him. The giant silently lowered his head and looked at him silently. That. The fat man thought for a moment. He looked at military counselor, smiled awkwardly, and said carefully, We are guests, right? Military counselor didn't figure out the circuit of the fat man's mind for a while and was speechless. At this time, the fat man's expression and attitude combined with the content of his words seemed to have a natural sense of humor. Even Qin Weibai was amused. Military counselor was a little speechless. Those who enter the door are guests, of course. You can be regarded as guests. But fat man, how did you get in? The fat man's face suddenly wrinkled, looking like a frowning bun. Fat man. He looked down at his figure. I'm not fat, am I? The giant beside him nodded hard, seeming to agree. Military counselor was a little confused. He strangely had no desire to attack these two people of unknown origin, but he didn't want to accompany them to talk nonsense here, especially at this crucial time. He looked down at the time and was about to speak when Qin Weibai's cold and calm voice sounded. Get to the point. Who are you? What are you doing here? What's your purpose? The fat man, who was looking down at his belly with a sad face, looked up. He seemed to see Qin Weibai, and his eyes lit up slightly. In the hazy night, Qin Weibai stood there in a light-colored dress. She was cold, quiet, dreamy, and ethereal. Her eyes had a soul-stirring charm to it. The fat man's eyes were a little dazed. It was not the eyes of dementia, nor did it contain very disgusting lust. Instead, it was a kind of innocence and joy as if seeing perfection. I suddenly want to write a poem, Fatty mumbled to himself. His eyes gradually regained their clarity and he smiled. His smile was very serious. Sister-in-law, you're one of the most beautiful ladies I've ever seen. Only my mother can compare with you. Qin Weibai had heard countless compliments, so she did not care about it. What she cared about was the word that the other person had unintentionally said. It was a term that modern people could never come into contact with, but they had definitely heard of it. Empress Mother. Qin Weibai narrowed her eyes. What kind of name was that? It's Mother. He looked at Qin Weibai seriously. His gaze changed as if he had some doubts. He said softly, Strange, there's a shadow of order on you. Qin Weibai quietly watched him talk nonsense without batting an eyelid. Fatty muttered something to himself, and then seemed too lazy to think about it. He just gave a thumbs up and flattered without any limits. Sister-in-law is indeed a goddess. I'm not sister-in-law. Qin Weibai's voice was a little cold. Of course you are. Fatty was very thick-skinned. He smiled and pointed to the place where Li Tianlan had just disappeared. The one who just left is my elder brother. That's my sister-in-law. Elder brother? Qin Weibai laughed. Do you know him? I don't know him yet, but I will soon. Inexplicable. Qin Weibai shook her head. What's your purpose? The question was simple and direct, and there was almost no room for evasion. Fatty scratched his head and smiled awkwardly. This question is a little complicated. My father? He seemed to feel that the title was a little awkward, so he paused again and smiled. My father asked me to come here to build a good relationship with my elder brother. In fact, I'm here to find a job. Qin Weibai and military counselor looked at each other. In the past 2 years, countless masters had joined Emperor Dong's palace, but most of them were in the probation period. Almost none of them could really win their trust. It seemed that this was the first time they had heard someone say that joining Emperor Dong's palace was to find a job. It was a little strange. Military counselor glanced at the giant who made him feel a little uncomfortable, and then looked at the harmless fat man in front of him. He said lightly, What's your realm? Realm? Fatty stared blankly, and the giant looked confused as well. Thunder-shocking realm? Or fire-flaming realm? Military counselor asked again. Fatty kept nodding. No, I don't have any realm. I never fight. I used to be a nurse, and now I'm a doctor. I'm self-taught. Doctor. When it came to the profession of doctor, Fatty's face was full of color, with a very clear touch of pride. You can even call me a biologist. I'm a real talent. Sister-in-law, I'm needed here, and my elder brother will also need me. Male nurse, doctor, biologist. Military counselor's mouth kept twitching. He looked at the giant beside Fatty and asked, What about him? Fatty was a little embarrassed. He's not good at anything. He'll run errands with me for the time being. If there's a chance, he can be a fitness coach, a PE teacher, or something. Well, he's good at basketball. Casually, Fatty arranged for the frightening-looking giant. Or you can let him be a security guard at the entrance. He'll be absolutely loyal to his duty. There's no problem with his size. There's no problem. Military counselor took a deep breath and calmed himself down. Do you have any certificates that can prove your professional abilities? Do security guards need certificates? Fatty was dumbfounded. I mean, a doctor's certificate. Saint clenched his teeth and said word by word. Well, no, Fatty murmured, but my ability is very good. I'm absolutely professional. What are you good at? Qin Weibai suddenly asked. Ergonomics, genetics and genetics. Fatty's answer was without hesitation. I've also been a battlefield doctor for a period of time. I'm very proficient in internal and external medicine. Fatty's eyebrows danced as he blew his own trumpet. What's your name? Qin Weibai glanced at the giant and asked slowly. The giant looked down at his young master. When he was about to say something, Fatty waved his hand and patted the belly of the giant beside him. He's Xing Tian. The giant's body shook, but he didn't say anything. My name is Shenyuan Wushang, Fatty said with a smile, but I prefer the name my mother gave me. Sister-in-law, you can call me Chongxing. Ji Chongxing. Shenyuan Wushang, Ji Chongxing. Qin Weibai frowned and asked subconsciously, "Why is your surname Shenyuan?" Fatty looked at Qin Weibai dully. After a while he said weakly, "Because my father's surname is Shenyuan." Chapter 988. The sword lights slowly converged at an Air Force base in a border city in Ningzhou province. The fighter plane was parked dozens of meters away, and the tower had completed the route planning. The commander of Ningzhou Corps was waiting next to the fighter plane in person. When he saw Li Tianlan appear from the converging sword light, he immediately trotted over, saluted Li Tianlan, and called him Your Majesty with a friendly expression. This major general came from the Border Control Corps and had served as a middle-level officer of the Thunderbolt Battalion. Later, he left the Border Control Corps because of a relapse of his injuries on the battlefield. With the personal intervention of Shi Hanbing, a direct subordinate of Dongqing Wudi, he had a meteoric rise after leaving the Border Control Corps. 2 years ago, he was promoted to the rank of Major General and came to Suzhou. Now, he could be regarded as the backbone of the giant group. "Commander Liu, thank you." Li Tianlan took the initiative to shake hands with him and said in a calm voice, "It's nothing. It's just a piece of cake." Commander Liu was not good at talking. He let go of Li Tianlan's hand and pointed to the fighter plane immediately. "Your Majesty, shall we go now?" "Okay." Li Tianlan looked at the time and did not hesitate. Commander Liu led the way to the 2-seater fighter plane nearby. "With the route specially approved by the Army headquarters, Your Majesty, we will arrive at Qingdao in about an hour and 20 minutes. Qingdao is ready. The fighter plane model there is more advanced. It will take about 50 minutes to arrive at the military airport in Choshui city of Beihai." Li Tianlan nodded. Before he spoke, his cell phone suddenly rang. Li Tianlan stopped, took out his cell phone, and glanced at it. It was a video call from Wang Xianxia. "Beihai has forcibly restored the communication with the outside world?" Li Tianlan pressed the answer button and looked at Wang Xianxia on the screen without speaking. Wang Xianxia also did not speak for a while. He looked a little haggard, but his aura was more stable and indifferent. "The final battle has begun." After taking a deep look at Li Tianlan, Wang Xianxia said in a low voice, "I'm in Ningzhou. I'll board the plane right away. How's the situation?" Li Tianlan asked directly. "Overall, it's not out of control, but it's not too good either." Wang Xianxia shook his head in response. "Around an hour ago, all of the other cities in the North Sea were attacked at the same time. We've already taken out a group of infiltrators, but there are still many infiltrators who have re-entered the North Sea. The North Sea Legion bases in all of the cities were the first to bear the brunt of the attack, followed by the city governments, police departments, headquarters of the sword-wielding families, and transportation hubs in all of the cities. All of our communications were forcibly cut off some time ago, and we're still out of contact with Choshui City. The invaders have taken over almost everything in Choshui City, so we're in a rather passive situation." His voice was a little hoarse. The decisive battle in the North Sea was unavoidable. Wang Xianxia was mentally prepared and had enough confidence to win. But having confidence was one thing, and seeing the situation in front of him was another. After all, this was his Beihai. Even if he won the decisive battle this time, the losses of Beihai could not be ignored. The lives of soldiers, the loss of talents, and the uneasiness of ordinary people could all be said to be Wang Xianxiao's responsibility. "Shangzhou is fine?" Li Tianlan's eyes flickered. They dare not come to the Shangzhou for the time being, but their ultimate goal must be the Shangzhou. Mount Dibing is here. From the perspective of defense, the power of the Shangzhou is the strongest and also the hardest bone to bite. So they will cause chaos in several other cities. The more people I send to rescue, the weaker the power of the Shangzhou will be. When the Xianxia is weakened to a certain extent, it will be the beginning of their general attack. Wang Xianxia said slowly. "So, what's your decision?" Li Tianlan was expressionless. "Rescue." Wang Xianxia answered without hesitation. "The All Heavens Forces and the Internal Defense Forces have gone to various cities in batches. I'm the Patriarch of the North Sea. I can't watch the cities in North Sea go out of control. Even if I know what they're thinking, I can't do nothing. Otherwise, even if the decisive battle is won, it will be meaningless." He looked at Li Tianlan and said in a calm tone, "So, I need your support." As long as you stay in Mount Dibbing, I can send most of the forces on Mount Dibbing to stabilize the situation. The experts of the Invincible Realm didn't show up, and even the experts of the half-step Invincible Realm didn't do much. These high-end forces must be used in Mount Dibbing. If you stay in Mount Dibbing, you will be our biggest guarantee. Li Tianlan twitched the corner of his mouth and said faintly, "The biggest guarantee of Mount Dibbing should not be me." Wang Xiangxiao's eyes flashed, but he didn't speak. "How is your father?" Li Tianlan asked directly. This was a question that had almost been ignored by the dark world. But this was the question that Li Tianlan was most concerned about now. The decisive battle in Beihai might be extremely dangerous and huge for others. But at present, it was certain that with the start of the decisive battle in Beihai, an earthquake that was bigger than the chaos in Snow Country more than 2 years ago had completely formed in the Dark World. Beihai Province and East Island were the first to bear the brunt. But this storm also swept through Wulan State and Snow Country. The relationship between Wang Xiaoyao and Snow Country, the relationship between Li Tianlan and Wulan State, and the relationship between Wulan State and Snow Country would all be tested. In Northern Europe, with the departure of Flaming Fire, the conflict between the Dark Knights and the Holy Land was destined to break out tonight. The Jiang family of America also began to stir up trouble. Although Lin Fengting was now in America, it was impossible for him to keep the whole of America calm by himself. Inside Jianghu State, Chen Fengqing also kept moving. Europe, America, Snow Country, Jianghu State, East Island, Beihai. At this point, it was no longer lively, but completely chaotic and messy. No one knew what the Dark World would be like after tonight. As far as Li Tianlan was concerned, he was not afraid of Jiang Shangyu, let alone Li Guangtu. Of course, he would be careful, but he would not be timid. Now, in the whole Dark World, the only thing that could make him worry was Sword Emperor Wang Tianzong, who was ignored by the Dark World. Wang Xiangxiao's face changed slightly, and his heart suddenly became a little subtle. Li Tianlan's voice was flat. Vaguely, his peers on the screen, even those who were a few years younger than him, had put him on the same level as Wang Tianzong. "How is your father?" It was a simple greeting, but with an indescribable condescension. "Dong Huang. His Majesty Dong Huang." Wang Xiangxiao felt a little bitter in his heart. He was silent for a long time and then said blandly, "I don't know." This was the truth, but it was not the whole truth. He really didn't know what Wang Tianzong's current state was, but it didn't mean anything else. Li Tianlan said, "Oh, when can you get to Mount Dibbing?" Wang Xiangxiao changed the subject. "I will get to Beihai soon." Li Tianlan said blandly, "But before Mount Dibbing, I need to get something from Beihai, something that belongs to me." He looked at the screen with meaningful eyes. Wang Xiangxiao seemed to think of something, but he didn't show any uneasiness. He just nodded and said, "Got it." Li Tianlan smiled and hung up the phone. He didn't know if Wang Xiangxiao really didn't know Wang Tianzong's state at this time. But it didn't matter, as long as he knew. At his current level, he might not be able to see how powerful that supreme realm was. But unlike Jiang Shangyu and Li Guangtu who were at the same level, Li Tianlan had seen the end of martial arts a long time ago, and he also had ruthlessness. Therefore he could simulate the power of Shen Yuan Feng and the 13-story building in their heyday, and he could roughly simulate Wang Tianzong's endurance at that time. Therefore, he could be sure that Wang Tianzong's injury could not be cured in a short time. But it was also impossible that he had no ability to fight at all. In the final battle of Beihai, Li Tianlan could cooperate with Beihai, but before Wang Tianzong took action, he would not take any action. The Jiang family of South America, Sanctuary, Purgatory of Heaven Capital, Jifeng Sword Training School, Wuji Palace. These were the comprehensive strength, which could be regarded as the top strength in the current Dark World. If they were buried in Beihai, Emperor Dong's palace would have cleared all obstacles in the Dark World. It was hard for Li Tianlan to do that himself. It was also hard for Wang Tianzong to do that. But when he was with Wang Tianzong, he could do it. When the final battle of Beihai ended, Wang Tianzong also overdrew the power he had accumulated for more than 2 years. Emperor Dong's palace was the only one left in the Dark World. Li Tianlan reached out and pinched his collar. The black collar with golden patterns engraved on it rubbed Li Tianlan's face intimately. He stepped onto the fighter plane and said calmly, "Let's go." For now, It didn't seem to matter what the surname of the fat man's father was. What mattered was the fat man's own ability. From a nurse to a doctor to a biologist. If Shenyuan Wushang was not bragging, and he was really good at ergonomics, genetics, then he was indeed a talent that Emperor Dong's palace needed very much. The development of countries in the world in these fields was far from mature. Even the Wang family of Beihai, which was the strongest in this field, could only be said to be relatively advanced in terms of ideas and technology. All the forces and countries, including the Wang family of Beihai, were just getting started in this field. If Shenyuan Wushang was an expert in this field, then not only Emperor Dong's palace, but all the forces would welcome him. It was not difficult to verify Shenyuan Wushang's professional ability. Although she did not know the origins of Shenyuan Wushang and Xing Tian, Qin Weibai did not want to miss out on talents. She took Shenyuan Wushang into the small conference room on the second floor of the castle. At the same time, she called the silver-eyed Nailan Shuriying, who was doing experiments in the underground laboratory. This core figure of the Wang family of Beihai had been in Emperor Dong's palace for more than 2 years. Except for regularly going to the headquarters of the Lin clan to record some data, she basically did not leave Emperor Dong's palace. Although Nailan Shuriying was young, her professional ability was recognized by the world. In terms of the technology and development progress of that year, Nailan Shuriying could be said to be the top expert in the field of ergonomics, genetics. Shenyuan Wushang's origin was a little strange and inexplicable. Qin Weibai always felt that he was not as simple as he appeared to be, but she could not feel any malice from him. She wanted Nailan Shuriying to test Shenyuan Wushang's quality. If he really had some real talent, she might as well take him in first. After all, in this field, even if they had Nailan Shuriying, there was still a big gap between them and the Wang family of Beihai. So there was a live interview in the small conference room. Both Qin Weibai and Nailan Shuriying felt that this matter was very simple. Nailan Shuriying, who had a cold temperament, was not good at talking. She just casually wrote down a few formulas. The formulas were not simple, but they were not very esoteric either. They were in line with the level of ordinary researchers in Nailan Shuriying's mind. Shenyuan Wushang silently watched Nailan Shuriying write the questions. His eyes were calm, indifferent, and calm. This kind of indescribable gaze made Nailan Shuriying angry. This fat man, who had been fawning over Qin Weibai when she came, looked at her in an extremely strange way. Nailan Shuriying could not describe that kind of feeling. There was no so-called amazement or appreciation. That kind of calmness was like a kind of careless indifference. It was like a person walking on the road seeing an ant under his foot, giving people a feeling that he was completely ignored. Nailan Shuriying was a little annoyed. She simply wrote down a formula that she had solved not long ago, and then handed it to Shenyuan Wushang with a cold face. Military counselor watched quietly. Qin Weibai watched quietly. Nailan Shuriying watched quietly. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Shenyuan Wushang. Xing Tian, who was as tall and burly as a wall, suddenly glanced at Nailan Shuriying. He had a high-energy warning expression on his face, and there was a touch of indescribable strangeness in his eyes. The fat man, who was holding a large bottle of purified water, took Nailan Shuriying's question and glanced at it. He raised his eyebrows slightly and smiled. That's it. At this moment, there seemed to be some very subtle changes in his body. Casually picking up the ballpoint pen beside him, the fat man held the pen with his somewhat thick fingers and quickly drew under the formulas. Countless symbols were arranged under the nib of his pen. Casual, helpless, and careless. There was no pause or thinking at all. 20 seconds later, the piece of paper handed to him by Nailan Shuriying had been full of various symbols. Take a look. Shenyuan Wushang put down the pen and handed the paper in his hand to Nailan Shuriying. Nailan Shuriying subconsciously took it. Her slender arms were trembling slightly, and even she herself was not aware of it. She took the paper handed over by the other party, looked at the answers on it, and frowned subconsciously. Time passed little by little. Nailan Shuriying's breathing gradually became rapid. She hurriedly glanced at the answers again, and then suddenly raised her head and looked at Shenyuan Wushang with a look of disbelief. Huh! Shenyuan Wushang seemed a little surprised. I thought you would say that my answer was wrong. It seems that you are very smart. It's not wrong. Nailan Shuriying stared blankly at Shenyuan Wushang. After a full minute, she shook her head absent-mindedly. How did you do it? At first glance, The other party's understanding of the formulas was indeed somewhat strange, but this strangeness came from the limitations of thinking. The other party's answer was correct, but the way he solved it was completely different. It was a way of thinking that could not be imitated. It was simple, incisive, and clear at a glance. The answer given by the other party was undoubtedly correct, but the way he solved the problem almost directly subverted Xianxia's thinking. Their original way of solving the problem seemed incomparably clumsy and ridiculous in the other party's way of thinking. For formulas, the fat man gave the optimal solution in 20 seconds. It was the optimal solution that even Xianxia could not achieve. This sounded like a fantasy story, but it had happened so magically. Is there any problem? Qin Weibai glanced at Xianxia. Xianxia was a little hesitant and shook her head subconsciously. The other party's way of thinking was extremely magical, but a few formulas could not explain his level. But what was certain was that he was absolutely qualified to work in the laboratory of Emperor Dong's palace. Xianxia thought for a moment and said softly, "If possible, I hope he can join my laboratory and become my main assistant." Qin Weibai opened her eyes wide in surprise. Xianxia suddenly felt a little nervous. She glanced at Shenyuan Wuxiang and avoided his eyes. "Can I?" Shenyuan Wuxiang smiled and shook his head. "Emperor Dong's palace is not short of researchers. I just want to be a doctor." He adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses. After a few seconds, he smiled and said, "I heard that His Majesty Donghuang wants to build a hospital in Emperor Dong's palace. If possible, I hope to work in this hospital." He picked up a pen again, wrote a set of formulas on the paper, and handed them to Xianxia. "Of course, if you have time, you can also come to me. We can communicate with each other." Xianxia took the formula from his hand and looked at it for a while. Her body suddenly trembled, and because she was too excited, an extremely obvious flush appeared on her face. The other party's formula was not a question, but a kind of somewhat general answer. What made Xianxia feel a little ashamed was that she couldn't even understand this formula for a while. She could only be sure that this formula was a model in the field of genes, which should be related to the deep repair of the human body. If this formula is true, it means... Xianxia bit her lip hard, and her whole mind was instantly immersed in this formula. "I found the direction," she suddenly said. "What?" Qin Weibai was a little stunned. "I found the direction of the third generation of eternal life, a very key direction." Xianxia's voice was a little trembling. "There can also be new progress in the situation of the Lin clan headquarters, and Miss Dongcheng His Highness situ. This formula. Bang! In the loud sound, military counselor, who had been sitting quietly, suddenly stood up. He stared at Shenyuan Wuxiang in front of him. "Can you save the boss?" "The boss?" Shenyuan Wuxiang's chubby face had a blank but polite smile. He touched the gold-rimmed glasses on the bridge of his nose again. The light shone on the lenses, shining with colorful light. This seemed to be a very common action. But behind the mirror that Qin Weibai and others could not see, countless torrents of data were flashing wildly on the lenses. The smile on Shenyuan Wuxiang's face gradually froze, and then he became a little embarrassed. He didn't find any information about the so-called boss. The formula he gave was a gift to Emperor Dong's palace to show his sincerity. So the formula was not given casually. The moment he touched his eyes, he had already invaded the confidential database of Emperor Dong's palace. The new city plan of Emperor Dong's palace in the future was clear at a glance from the Li family's Tree of Life plan. He found some interesting information in the biological laboratory of Emperor Dong's palace, which was the detailed physical data of several wounded people and the recent changes in their physical data. It was also a problem that he thought would be difficult for them to solve in 10 or 20 years. The formula he gave based on the situation of several people was very targeted, so he was very satisfied with this gift. But the boss, Shenyuan Wuxiang, touched his eyes again. A huge amount of data flashed wildly, and all the documents in the confidential database of Emperor Dong's palace were turned out by him in an instant. He coughed and said a little embarrassedly, "Well, who is the boss?" Qin Weibai glanced at Xianxia. Xianxia suddenly came to her senses. She hurriedly said, "Wait a minute." Then she left the conference room and rushed into the elevator. The elevator went all the way down. After a short pause, it went up again. The sound of high-heeled shoes hitting the ground was getting closer and closer. Nalan Shurying came in with 2 folders. The folders recorded all the physical data of the master of Samsara Palace in the past 6 months. She put the folders in front of Shenyuan Wuxiang and said sincerely, "This is the information of the wounded people." Shenyuan Wuxiang took the files and carefully observed the data on them. The light of the gold-rimmed glasses flickered slightly, and all the data was quickly imprinted on the lenses as he turned them. A large amount of data merged with each other and constantly outlined on the lenses. Finally, a slender and tall figure of a woman appeared. Shenyuan Wuxiang frowned slightly and looked up at Qin Weibai with a little astonishment in his eyes. Qin Weibai's heart suddenly sank, but she didn't show it on the surface. The figure that only Shenyuan Wuxiang could see on the lenses quickly dissipated. The data that belonged to Shenyuan Wuxiang once again easily entered the database of Emperor Dong's palace and the computer in the laboratory. After confirming all the body data, he watched Nalan Shurying's flight records in the past 6 months. There was no distance in the internet. The data that belonged to Shenyuan Wuxiang flowed freely in the internet world, bypassing the secret databases of many countries. The next second, in the laboratory of the Lin clan's headquarters in Europe, a large amount of data began to roll on the computer, and all the cameras were turned on. In the conference room of the headquarters of Emperor Dong's palace, the reflection of the figure lying in the foam-like nutrient solution and the perfect, pale, bloodless face was reflected on the lenses of the gold-rimmed glasses. All the data merged perfectly. Shenyuan Wuxiang's body suddenly shook. He looked at Qin Weibai, who was forcing herself to be calm, and his eyes were a little complicated. He muttered to himself, "What's going on? 2 sisters-in-law? Exactly the same?" He gradually frowned and looked at Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai looked at him silently. There was a short silence. "Who the hell are you?" the 2 of them asked in unison. "I'm a doctor." Shenyuan Wuxiang spread his hands. "Maybe I can be regarded as a low-level hacker, but mainly I'm a doctor." He knocked on the documents on the table, looked at Qin Weibai, and asked, "Sister-in-law, what about you?" Qin Weibai was silent for a while and slowly said, "What did you see?" "That." Shenyuan Wuxiang narrowed his eyes and suddenly smiled. "I just compared the data and entered the confidential database of Emperor Dong's palace by the way. I found the file of Wounded Number 1, and then I followed her flight records to invade the network system of a manor and saw another sister-in-law." "You can invade the confidential database of Emperor Dong's palace?" Qin Weibai didn't know what kind of tone she was using. Emperor Dong's palace had been established for a short time, but it didn't mean that the level of Emperor Dong's palace was not good. As the world's most powerful financial institution, the Flourishing Age Fund had all kinds of talents. The data firewall of Emperor Dong's palace was set up by dozens of top talents. It might be possible that it could be invaded, but how could it not even send out the intrusion alarm? And it seemed that at that moment, he not only invaded the database of Emperor Dong's palace, but also the headquarters of the Lin clan. "I'm also a hacker, but I'm still a doctor," Shenyuan Wuxiang said seriously. "So, what's going on? Why are there 2 of you?" "As you can see." Qin Weibai was silent for a while. "I am her, and she is me. Time travel? Parallel universe? Overlapping dimensions?" Shenyuan Wuxiang frowned. "I don't know." Qin Weibai shook her head. She suddenly felt a little strange. Shenyuan Wuxiang's reaction seemed a little strange, but she couldn't tell what was strange. "It's very strange," he murmured to himself. His words were fast and messy, and Qin Weibai found it difficult to listen. "Big boss, boring, crazy, order. So the shadow of order in you should come from the other sister-in-law? Or the other you?" Shenyuan Wuxiang said softly. It was order again. When they first met not long ago, he said that Qin Weibai had the shadow of order. Qin Weibai's tone was calm. She looked at Shenyuan Wuxiang seriously. "What is the order you mentioned?" Shenyuan Wuxiang looked at Qin Weibai quietly for a long time. After a long time he chuckled. "It's probably what we understand. Order is order. For example, the order of a country, laws, rules, order, system, food, housing, and transportation are all orders. The simplest explanation is..." He took a deep look at Qin Weibai. "Omnipotent, omniscient, and omnipresent. That's order." He gently knocked on the information in front of him. The other sister-in-law is in a very strange state. She can't be said to be alive, but she's not completely dead. I'm sure I can wake her up, but not now. Not only her, but also the other two patients. Believe me, it's not a bad thing to keep them asleep for a short time. Of course, we can improve their current physical conditions little by little. Xianxia, who had been silent, subconsciously glanced at Shenyuan Wuxiang. Qin Weibai was silent for a long time, and then said softly, "You said your father asked you to build a good relationship with Tianlan? Where is your father? Where are you from?" Shenyuan Wuxiang was stunned. His glasses flickered, and he quickly glanced at the map of Jianghu province that appeared on the glasses. "My father is a little busy. His business is very big, and I'm afraid I won't see him in a short time." In a short time again. Xianxia glanced at him again. Shenyuan Wuxiang continued with a smile. "I'm from the Central Plains. Zhongyuan province, with the compound surname Shenyuan." Qin Weibai had decided to do a thorough investigation. She thought silently and glanced at military counselor. Military counselor nodded and reached out his hand to Shenyuan Wuxiang. Then, "Welcome to Emperor Dong's palace." "It's my honor." Shenyuan Wuxiang narrowed his eyes with a smile. "You'll work in the biological laboratory of Emperor Dong's palace from now on. As for this one..." No. Shenyuan Wuxiang shook his head. "I'm a doctor, and I still choose to be a doctor. It's my favorite profession." Military counselor was stunned and didn't speak. "I'll find a way to treat the 3 special patients." Shenyuan Wuxiang smiled. "Okay." Qin Weibai nodded. "But the hospital of Emperor Dong's palace doesn't have much room for you to perform. If you don't mind, how about being a battlefield doctor?" Shenyuan Wuxiang blinked and looked at Qin Weibai innocently. "Go to East Island." Qin Weibai smiled. "Go now. Trust me, it's the best place for you." He glanced at military counselor. Military counselor nodded. "I'll arrange it right away. You two follow me." Qin Weibai smiled. "Most of the elites of Emperor Dong's palace are in East Island now. I hope you two can do your best to ensure our survival. Have a safe trip." The helicopter roared and left Emperor Dong's palace, flying further and further away. In the spacious cabin, Shenyuan Wuxiang and Xianxia sat opposite each other, staring at each other. After an unknown period of time, Shenyuan Wuxiang smiled and said, "We were sent away just like that. That little sister-in-law is very smart, but she still doesn't trust us enough. She must have already sent people to investigate our origins. She can't find anything," Xianxia said in a low voice. "What else can we do?" Shenyuan Wuxiang looked at the night scenery outside the window. "But it doesn't matter. Anyway, we don't have other thoughts. It's good to be a doctor." "Xianxia, what are you going to do?" "It's boring to be in a daze every day." "Young master, I'm Violent Dragon," Xianxia said in a low voice. "His master doesn't like my name." "But that's your name. Your surname is Xing, and your given name is Tian. A code name is a code name, but you can't change your name. And don't get me wrong. It's not that he doesn't like your name. He just thinks you don't deserve it now. Now, at such a long distance, he doesn't even know that you're called Jade Emperor, let alone Xianxia. We're different. I won't stay here for long, but you don't know how long you'll stay. Do you want people to call you Violent Dragon all the time? Violent Dragon, Violent Dragon. It's so unpleasant." He touched his eyes, looked at the news that only he could see and said lazily, "I'll find a chance to go to that Wolf-Free Heights. It's so strange. I thought Li Tianlan was an exception, but this couple is unexpectedly terrible. I really see order in her. It's a miracle. I'm sure that Fatty has nothing to do with anyone in any of my previous books, let alone time travel or parallel universes. Fatty is Fatty. In fact, I'm just a fatty who thinks he's very young." Chapter 989. Because of the time difference, when the plane landed in Wulan State, it was just evening. It was the polar night in the eastern part of the European continent. The sky was gloomy, and it was night 24 hours a day. The sound of the staff on the plane lowering the gangway rang out. The cold wind whistled into the cabin. She, who had sunk her body into the leather sofa, slowly opened her eyes from meditation. "Your Highness, we have arrived at our destination." The staff walked quickly to her side, bowed slightly, and whispered softly. She seemed to be in a trance. She gave a slow hum and turned her head to look at the scenery outside the small window of the cabin. It was cold outside the window. The sky was snowy, and it was pure white. "Got it." She stood up a little slowly and walked to the cabin door a little unsteadily. There was a thick layer of snow in sight, and the pure whiteness extended to the end of the line of sight. Facing the cabin door, dozens of men in casual clothes with cold and calm auras stood quietly behind a lieutenant general in military uniform, like silent statues. The distant lights swept across the sky, forming beams of light in the wind and snow. Everything in front of her seemed to be a large military base. The icy wind blew in her face. Because of the cold, her body looked more and more stiff. Standing in front of the cabin door, she looked at the crowd below silently and did not speak for a while. "Everyone, salute!" A loud and clear voice cut through the snowy night sky. Led by the general at the front of the crowd, dozens of soldiers raised their hands to salute at the same time. Her expression gradually eased, and she walked down the spiral staircase little by little. "Your Highness, welcome to the Arctic Ocean Corps Air Base." The lieutenant general put down his saluting palm, took 2 steps forward, and reached out to her. "I'm Cheng Huaining." Cheng Huaining, the commander of the Arctic Ocean Corps of Jianghu State, the acting commander of the Snowdance Corps, and the highest military commander in the Arctic Ocean region of Jianghu State, was born in the Border Control Corps. A few years ago, he was the most valued general of Dongqing Wudi and one of the core figures of the giant group. If there was no accident, after this year's election, there would inevitably be a gold star on his shoulder. If there was no suitable candidate at that time, his title of acting commander of the Snowdance Corps could basically be removed. "Hello." She reached out very slowly, and both her expression and tone were a little stiff. "Cheng. General." "Your Highness, you." Cheng Huaining frowned and looked a little worried. "Nothing. My lockdown needs to be adjusted," she answered slowly, and her every move seemed extremely slow. An extremely subtle aura began to slowly awaken from her body. It wasn't very powerful, but it was extremely sharp and abundant. She took 2 steps forward, looked at the team behind Cheng Huaining, and asked slowly, "These are the elites I selected from the Arctic Ocean Legion. There are 20 Thundershocking Realm experts, and 2 of them are at the peak of the Thundershocking Realm. The other 40 people are all close to the peak of the Fire Flaming Realm. I plan to let them go to North Sea with your Highness. They should be able to do something." She stood there for a long time without saying anything. The subtle aura gradually became obvious, and the speed of recovery was getting faster and faster. She was now very slow in accepting information, always 1 beat slower than ordinary people, but her heart was very active. Her thinking was not hindered, but it was difficult for her to express herself. She forced a breakthrough and wanted to become the only expert at the peak of the invincible realm in the dark world today, but she failed. Her internal injury was extremely serious, so she directly used sword energy to seal most of the skills in her body, which was similar to a self-seal. The powerful vitality close to the peak of the invincible realm was repairing her injuries all the time. Her aura was recovering little by little, and she adjusted her combat capability according to the situation and opponent she encountered. When her sword intent was released, it was also when she was at her peak. The organs that were constantly repaired by her own vitality wouldn't react in a short time when her power broke out. She could naturally maintain her peak state in a short time. This was equivalent to deceiving her body, and the price was that her physical injury was aggravated. "No need. Stay," she said softly. Among the 80 warriors in front of her, 20 were in the Thunder-Shocking Realm. Although there was only 1 at the peak of the Thunder-Shocking Realm, it was still a powerful force in any case. In addition, there were 60 in the Fire-Flaming Realm. In total, the lowest average strength was already at the peak of the Fire-Flaming Realm. The most important thing was that compared with their identities as experts, they were warriors. What did this mean? This meant that they had an unusual tacit understanding, discipline, and strong ability to execute on the battlefield. If a team of the same size in the Dark World encountered such a team, it would probably be crushed in minutes. There were very few organized troops whose average strength was at the peak of the Fire-Flaming Realm in the entire Dark World. Even in the heyday of the Samsara Palace and the current Emperor Dong's palace, they couldn't produce such troops. And the most famous such troops were the Heaven Punishment Troop of the Wang family of Beihai. 300 warriors whose average strength was at the peak of the fire-flaming realm could even seriously injure an invincible realm expert when they cooperated perfectly. The 80 people in front of her were equivalent to more than a quarter of the troops of all heavens. It was impossible for the Arctic Ocean Corps to have such a family, so the 80 people in front of her could only be the experts that Chang Huaining had tried every means to transfer from various departments of the army. It could even be said that they were the vast majority of the experts in the Arctic Ocean Corps. Each of them was a middle or high-level officer in the army. Of course, there was no problem with the tacit understanding of this group of people. The final battle in Beihai was a cruel battlefield that was destined to bury countless bones. Thunder-shocking realm experts and even invincible realm experts would die. Even if she had nothing to do with the Arctic Ocean Corps, she was reluctant to send these people to the battlefield. And now the power of Wulan State had been unprecedentedly weak. If these people were transferred away, the order of the entire Wulan State might be affected. Her voice was slow, but it was clear. There was a commotion in the crowd. They stay in Snow Country. It was Flaming Fire of the Samsara Palace, who was also the Queen of the Dark Knights, Xianxia, who spoke with some difficulty. Chang Huaining froze for a moment and said softly, "Your Highness, don't worry. I have arranged enough forces in Snow Country." Xianxia still shook her head. Her aura gradually recovered, and her tone became clearer. "Stay. And Tianlan, that's enough. There's no need." For Beihai, Chang Huaining was silent for a while, then smiled helplessly and said, "I understand." Knights. Xianxia looked at Chang Huaining with a hint of inquiry. Chang Huaining smiled and said softly, "Your Highness, don't worry. I can guarantee that the knights will be safer than ever." Xianxia looked back in the direction from which she came. The night sky was high and deep. It was snowing, and everything was quiet. She couldn't see the situation in the northern part of the European continent, but the sky splashed with blood and fire in the war had appeared in her mind. Xianxia turned around and said softly, "Let's go." The European continent was already on fire. But no one expected that the first place where the fire lit up was not the headquarters of the Dark Knights, which was empty after Xianxia left. Instead, it was the Holy Land that had always been recognized as inviolable by everyone in the European continent. The raging fire was accompanied by. When the huge explosion sounded, it was close to midnight in the Holy Land. The huge destructive force of the explosion directly broke down some of the old walls of the Holy Land, and the damaged buildings collapsed toward the interior of the Holy Land. In the deafening sound, dozens of soldiers of the Holy Disarmament Corps who guarded the wall were blown to pieces on the spot. The crazy roar of the engines sounded almost at the same time as the explosion. Under the night sky, several cars rushed into the Holy Land at full horsepower. The vehicles were running amok on the exquisite streets of the Holy Land, which could be said to be extremely small. Their goal was clear and direct, and they rushed straight to the Holy Palace in the center of the Holy Land. After a short period of astonishment, the Holy Disarmament Corps reacted immediately. The scarlet and dazzling signal flare representing the enemy's attack suddenly rose into the sky. The entire Holy Land was dyed with a layer of blood under the light of the signal flare. "How dare you!" In the furious roar, the masters of the Holy Land finally recovered from their stupor at the moment the signal flare rose into the air. Their rumbling voice resounded through the entire Holy Land like thunder. "You are courting death." How many years had it been? How many years had it been since someone had been so presumptuous? Everyone in the Holy Land had never experienced or even imagined such a scene in their lives. Someone dared to directly attack the Holy Land? Were they crazy? In an instant, an incomparably violent thunderbolt lit up in the Holy Palace. The clear sound of thunder rolled across the sky, and countless dark blue electric arcs rose straight from the ground into the sky. 1, 2, countless dense electric arcs spread quickly between heaven and earth, and almost in an instant, they covered the entire nearby world. There was cold killing intent everywhere between heaven and earth. Endless electric arcs crisscrossed above the sky, and then fell wildly. Thunder rain. The dense electric arcs smashed down like a rainstorm, hitting every car. The sound of explosions kept ringing, and the motorcade that was madly sprinting toward the gate of the Holy Palace exploded one after another. The off-road vehicle at the front, which had obviously been specially modified, suddenly shook, and the huge body directly expanded in the process of crazy driving. A layer of extremely heavy armor appeared on the body, and a large amount of energy-absorbing materials were placed on the armor. The rainstorm-like lightning almost directly overturned the entire motorcade, and the vehicles exploded one by one. In the fire, the masters who did not hide their aura accelerated and charged, while the vehicle at the front stared at the rainstorm-like lightning and continued to accelerate. Accelerating. Faster and faster. The thick exhaust pipe of the vehicle emitted thick smoke, and the seemingly extremely cumbersome vehicle was less than 200 meters away from the Holy Palace. In an instant, its speed more than doubled. Carbon monoxide accelerated. The huge body of the vehicle almost rose into the air under the extreme acceleration at the cost of destroying the vehicle itself. Facing the lightning that filled the sky, it directly crashed into the gate of the Holy Palace. A figure dashed out of the vehicle and stood in mid-air. Amidst the earth-shattering explosion, the vehicle that was filled with high explosives slammed into the gate of the Holy Palace. The vehicle disintegrated, and flames soared into the sky. In the distorted space, the sturdy building of the Holy Palace seemed to distort violently, and a huge crack tens of meters wide was blown out. At the last moment, a thin old man rushed out of the vehicle. He stood in mid-air, and a light blue light curtain appeared on the surface of his body. The rain of lightning in the sky continued to fall, but the moment it landed on his body, it was melted by the light curtain. Dressed in a tuxedo, trousers, clean and kind leather shoes, and neatly combed grayish-white hair, the meticulously dressed old man narrowed his eyes as he looked at the main gate of the Holy Palace that had been blown open. He smiled softly. As expected of the tortoise shell of the Holy Palace, it's really hard. The high explosives in the vehicle were a new product developed by the Knights of Darkness. Although there was not much in the vehicle, it was enough to successfully blow up an entire building if it were a normal building. However, it only blew up a gap tens of meters wide in the Holy Palace, and did not even cause any casualties. The defensive power of the buildings of the Holy Palace was indeed a little exaggerated. It's you! In the thunderstorm, a burly figure in light armor suddenly rose into the sky. Sin! You're courting death. Yes. The old man smiled faintly. Little fool, can you kill me? The burly figure in the armor suddenly tightened his body, and his killing intent was monstrous. He hated the name Little Fool, but damn it, the whole European continent seemed to know his name, and the culprit was the old man with the code name Sin in front of him. Little Fool was not Little Fool. In the Holy Disarmament Corps, he had no name, but he had a number. Number 2. The number 2 adjudicator of the Holy Disarmament Corps. If this position was placed in other forces, it would be equivalent to the top guest protector or elder with real power. His status in the whole European continent was extremely high. The people who could sit in this position were at least the top half-step invincible realm experts. In the most glorious period of the Holy Land, there were even examples of invincible realm experts serving as the number 2 adjudicator. The Sin in front of him was the chief butler of the Dark Knights. Before the Dark Queen joined the Dark Knights, his status could be said to be second only to the commander of the Dark Knights, Raphael. His code name was Sin, but he had a lot of nicknames in Europe, such as Adjudicator Hand, Dark Gospel, and Shadow Assassin. In the eyes of the Holy Land, the Dark Knights had always been an alien that they wanted to get rid of. In the eyes of the Holy Land, their high-level code names always carried a strong sense of heresy, such as sin, pride, desire, fury, sloth. If one wanted to trace back to the source, the original purpose of the Dark Knights was to fight against the Holy Land a long time ago. Therefore, they used whatever the Holy Land didn't like, always provoking the bottom line of the Holy Land. Therefore, in the vast Europe, compared with the Shadow Throne and Rothschild, who could more threaten the status of the Holy Land, the friction between the Holy Land and the Dark Knights was the most. Number 2 and Sin had dealt with each other more than once. The name Little Fool was a nickname given to him by Sin at random after he lost to him. Adjudicator Hand, Dark Gospel, Shadow Assassin. Sin had a lot of nicknames, and he was awe-inspiring. And as the number 2 adjudicator of the Holy Disarmament Corps, he also had his own nickname. Little Fool. Number 2 gritted his teeth, and a cold voice squeezed out of his teeth word by word. Blasphemy against the Holy Land, you! Endless lightning swelled wildly on his body, one after another. The blue light shone wildly in the air, getting brighter and brighter. Damn it! Whoosh! A violent sound of breaking through the air suddenly sounded. Number two's body suddenly rose into the air, and he punched Sin's face hard. The lightning all over the sky condensed in an instant. Number two's body rushed over a distance of tens of meters in the blink of an eye. All the lightning condensed on his body. The thunder rain suddenly disappeared. Number two, whose whole body was covered with lightning, seemed to have become the only light source in the night. With a mocking face, Sin stood motionless in the air. Number two, be careful. A roar suddenly sounded from the back of the holy palace. At the moment when the lightning condensed, the lightning all over the sky converged, and the world changed from bright to dark. Light and darkness intertwined. When everyone's eyes were a little dazed, a thin figure appeared in front of number two like a ghost. There was only Sin in number two's eyes. In the past 10 years, in the constant friction between the Holy Land and the Dark Knights, he had fought with Sin 3 times, lost twice, and suffered a crushing defeat once. Number two's resentment towards Sin had reached the point of overflowing. Sin could be said to be one of the strongest superiors of the half-step invincible realm in Europe. Although his state had declined as he grew older, he was still a European. The top of the half-step invincible realm. Under normal circumstances, number two would still be no match for him. But this was the Holy Land. This was his home ground. He had accepted the Pope's coronation. In this state, his combat capability was enough to match the combat capability of the invincible realm. Number two was a little angry, but also a little excited. This might be his only chance to kill this old bastard. The lightning between heaven and earth converged into his body. Number two's body suddenly shook. The space within 100 meters nearby suddenly twisted, and was about to form a pseudo-domain. An incomparably bright light burst out from number two. At this second, someone behind him warned, and the thin ghost-like figure appeared beside him at the moment when his pseudo-domain was about to take shape. The cold light flashed away. The world suddenly turned upside down. In an instant, number two felt that the world was his body. His body flew in all directions, and it seemed that he was everywhere. Number two had never experienced this feeling. Under normal circumstances, it was impossible for him to get the Pope's spiritual coronation. Was this the feeling of the combat capability of the invincible realm? He was in a trance, and his sight suddenly became dark. Number two. A hoarse and furious roar could be faintly heard from behind. The light in the air that was about to rush in front of Sin instantly dimmed and disappeared. A large amount of blood mist splashed directly in front of Sin. The thin figure flashed away, and the extremely sharp cold light seemed to be poured into number two's body in an instant. Silently, number two's body was broken into countless pieces of flesh and blood in an instant. His torso, limbs, and head were completely decomposed and scattered in all directions. The thin figure disappeared. Sin stood quietly in the air. Number two's body fell to the ground. There was a sudden dead silence in front of the Holy Palace. Sin narrowed his eyes and quietly looked at the Holy Palace in front of him. On the street behind him, the sound of vehicle wreckage constantly exploded. One figure after another was gathering together and sprinting toward the Holy Palace. The Holy Palace did not have any extreme reaction. "Ha!" Sin chuckled. "Duke." A hoarse voice sounded from inside the Holy Palace. Another high-level officer of the Holy Disarmament Corps appeared in front of the Holy Palace. He looked at the thin figure beside Sin with solemn eyes. Duke smiled and seemed to be a little happy. After leaving the Dark World for more than 2 years, it felt good that someone would remember his name. Samsara Palace. Duke. Europe's top assassin. Among the 12 supermasters of the Samsara Palace, if Flaming Fire was not included, Duke's ranking was second only to Saint and Military Counselor. In terms of combat capability, Duke, who was in the half-step invincible realm, was no worse than Military Counselor. When Saint and Military Counselor rarely took action, Duke in general represented the top combat capability of the Samsara Palace in foreign affairs most of the time. Chaotic footsteps sounded from inside the Holy Palace. Countless soldiers of the Holy Disarmament Corps were gathering and rushing to the gate of the Holy Palace. The high-level officer of the Holy Disarmament Corps, who recognized Duke, looked away from Duke and looked at the street ahead. The crowd was showing more and more obvious signs of decline in the night. The crowd was not large. About 100 people. But a considerable number of them were acquaintances. Even if most of them could not be named, They all looked very familiar. They were all high-level combat capability of the Dark Knights. In the past countless conflicts between the Sanctuary and the Knights, these people were old friends who had dealt with the Sanctuary more than once. His eyes fell on the front of the crowd. The tall and burly figure at the front of the crowd slowly moved forward. His face was expressionless, but a pair of eyes full of brutality and coldness, like those of a beast, were fixed on him. He stopped breathing and subconsciously took half a step back. Samsara Palace. General. Another top expert in the half-step invincible realm. The Samsara Palace had been destroyed for more than 2 years. But at a very critical point in time that no one expected, the two supermasters, who had represented the top combat capability of the Samsara Palace most of the time, appeared in front of the Holy Palace with the Dark Knights. Duke, General, and Sin. The 3 top experts in the half-step invincible realm. The 3 of them together were enough to entangle an ordinary invincible realm expert. And now the Sanctuary. He lowered his head, and his heart was full of bitterness. In the current Sanctuary and the current Holy Disarmament Corps, there was not even a top expert in the half-step invincible realm, let alone the invincible realm expert. The crowd of the Dark Knights was approaching the Holy Palace step by step. A large number of experts exerted their strength at the same time, and the entire street of the Sanctuary was shaking slightly. More and more people of the Holy Disarmament Corps gathered in front of the Holy Palace, but from beginning to end, no one took the initiative to attack. Sin watched this scene quietly. He laughed a little cruelly. It seems that the intelligence is right. His voice swept through the Holy Palace with the night wind. The famous Holy Land is really just a bunch of kittens and puppies now. Did all your elites really get sent to East Island? The intelligence of the Samsara Palace is never wrong. Duke muttered with some dissatisfaction. The high-level officials of the Holy Disarmament Corps at the front of the Holy Palace clenched their fists subconsciously. The Sanctuary had been in a state of extreme emptiness for more than 2 years. In the chaos of Snow Country, the Sanctuary lost not only Arsis and Moraid, who took away the Knights Templar, but also thousands of the most elite and powerful Holy Disarmament warriors. In Mormons, thousands of people and the Arsis tribe trembled in despair under the dark shadow. The tribe was robbed and slaughtered, and the strength of the entire Holy Disarmament Corps declined seriously. In more than 2 years, although the Holy Disarmament Corps had recovered some of its strength, more than half of the experts were transferred by the Pope to Moraid. Among the experts who went to East Island, there was an invincible realm expert trained by the Holy Land 2 months ago, and the #1 adjudicator of the Holy Disarmament Corps. The Pope crowned the 2 of them, which could temporarily help the invincible realm experts stabilize their realm, and at the same time, give adjudicator #1 the combat capability of the invincible realm. At the headquarters of the Sanctuary, the Pope crowned adjudicator #2 again, giving him the combat capability of the invincible realm temporarily. The consecutive crowns made the Pope feel tired. The comprehensive strength of the Sanctuary was at its lowest tonight. Relying on adjudicator #2, several thundershocking realm experts, and the power of the Judgment Corps, they could only defend the Sanctuary and could not do anything to the outside world. Under such circumstances, they were ambushed by the Dark Knights. What was worse was that adjudicator #2 was killed in a second under Duke's sneak attack. The strength of the entire Holy Disarmament Corps dropped again. On the chaotic night, Sin stood in the air and raised his palm with a smile. The experts of the Dark Knights on the street began to speed up. After tonight, his voice echoed slowly between heaven and earth. The entire Sanctuary will become history. Knights! The dazzling lightning lit up on the old man, getting brighter and brighter. Charge! You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.